Hello and welcome to the Rat Nest Podcast, episode number 46 with
Seven, six.
Johnathan McBurnie.
Hey, what's up, Jonathan?
Hello. Great to see you.
Thanks for being here, dude. Really appreciate you making time for us. I know we had a little bit of trouble figuring out the time difference earlier. For some reason, we can't do math, but really appreciate it, dude.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. It's great chatting with you on this lovely, hot as anything Saturday afternoon here in Australia.
Yeah, so it's what, 5 p.m. where you're at in Queensland or Rockhampton, right?
Yeah.
5 p.m. on Saturday, and we're here. It's 11 p.m. on Friday. So you're technically in the future to me. That's the way I think of it. You're from Americas, but you're in the freaking future, man.
Well, I can tell you, coming from the future, not too much has changed. So
good to know.
Dude, well, let's get down to it. I mean, Johnathan, you're in what do you classify yourself as? Illustrator, painter, an artist? I mean, where does it start?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and one I've sort of struggled with a lot of my life because I've always made comics. I've always exhibited, and now I've somehow sort of stumbled into another vocation as a writer and a gallery kind of person. So I don't know what I am. I just do it and keep busy. So yeah, I think my Instagram handle says something like artist, cartoonist, cult hero, or something like that.
Yeah,
so that sums it up.
I love it when you're able to, or when you meet someone or you see an artist that's able to do so many varieties of things, somebody that doesn't get stuck in one rut or doesn't get stuck in one thing and is able to just, as I call it, like flow with the muse. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As it calls, you do that medium, and as it directs you, you start writing or you paint or you illustrate or whatever it may be.
Well, and it all feeds each other, I mean, I used to be a bit of a musician in high school and sort of had to give that up just to make time for everything else. But it all feeds each other. To me, music and literature and film feed me just as much as the visual arts and comics. So it's all sort of this weird soup.
Yeah.
A weird stew.
Yeah, man, it's evident in your work. I mean, at least the pieces and books that I've seen. There's a fascination. There's a connection with like pop culture and iconic imagery. As far as like, I don't know, maybe it's just a relative timeline to my own. Like, maybe we're like close in the same age because it's everything I grew up with.
Yeah. It really does seep in. I've sort of had an interesting upbringing. Both my parents are artists as well. My dad's a printmaker, my mum's a sculptor. So I've sort of always had these different things thrown into the mix there from their own perspectives as well. And I don't know, I think it just makes you a bit sensitive to what you're seeing all the time and what you're interested in, and sort of, even as a little kid, Dad was always like kind of, we'd be watching cartoons and he'd be kind of, oh, well, that's a reference to this and that's a reference to that. And we'd be go, oh, you know what? Even in The Simpsons, it's just so stacked with references to other films and music and all sorts.
Yes.
Actually, even Seinfeld, I watched a clip recently that had every different film reference in Seinfeld, and there were dozens there that it didn't even click, even though it's in those films. It was amazing. So yeah, I've always enjoyed that kind of, joke within a joke within a joke, and those little subtle hints at other forms. I love that.
Yeah, I grew up watching The Simpsons. I like to say that like The Simpsons kind of taught me the birds and the bees and like all the like major important stuff that your parents don't want to like tell you about,
Yeah.
I learned from cartoons. But yeah, it's funny because I'll see a book or I'll hear a quote and I go, oh, that's from The Simpsons, but it's so far beyond that. It's such a like intellectual show beyond being this like super just goofy, fun cartoon show.
Definitely. I was thinking the other day just how sort of deep it's sort of seeped into a certain generation of humor and understanding how popular culture works. I feel like now that I'm nearly 40 now, and working with a team of mostly people a fair bit younger than me, I'm realizing that these things are not eternal, and you know, there are trends and fashions, and perhaps what we have grown up with The Simpsons is maybe a little bit passe and old hat, which makes it quite fun to play with in itself. But yeah, things definitely change. Maybe now I know how Monty Python felt in the 90s or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be back. It'll be back.
Yeah. I mean, it hasn't gone away. I mean, it's still putting out episodes and stuff, but the feel of it is definitely different. My nephew's like 10, so he's just starting to get into it. And
wow.
He was showing me some of the newer ones that he'd been watching, and it's still good, but it nothing. I don't know. It's just a time and a place, right? That it affects you at. So nothing's going to be as good as it is when you're 10 years old.
But it speaks to the writing on that show for them to be able to basically transcend generations. You know what I mean? They're going, 30 years strong or something like that. And yeah, for us, we're like, oh, it's changed. It's not the same show, but that's what they have to do in order to morph with time, you know, and to be able to do that and not get stuck in their own rut, like I was talking about earlier, be able to see the bigger picture and be like, oh, it's better to follow them than make them follow us.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, you know, I've been on a bit of a David Bowie bender lately, and a bit of a Dylan bender, and to see them progressing through the decades is wonderful. And as much as I love AC/DC, they've always kind of done the same thing. And if I'm honest with myself, there's about 3 albums I go back to again and again, and the others, they kind of lose me a little. You know, but it's nice having, I've, you know, recently been getting into Dylan's sort of weird 80s stuff with Mark Knopfler. And I mean,
there's a lot.
I hated that when I was a teenager, but now I'm loving it. So, you know, it's nice to have that extra layer to somebody, I suppose.
For sure. And I think as we get older, I don't know if it's because I'm more like been in music or been around music. Like when it comes to that, I'm able to appreciate so much more now that I'm older. Stuff that when I heard when I was younger, like, this is not good, or I don't like that. You know? Now you hear the art in it, or you hear the like what the artist was doing and how experimental it was at the time, and like being able to appreciate all that really can change the way you listen to an artist, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I find what happens for me anyway, the older I get, I don't tend to dismiss groups or people that I liked in the past, but I tend to find more new ones or embrace something that I might not have enjoyed earlier. So I feel lucky. I speak to people when they go, oh yeah, you know, The Cure, I used to like them. And that's something I never really say. I used to like that. I don't know. I tend to have if they win me over, I'm won, you know, I'm there. Unless they turn out to be horrible people and abusing children or something. Not that The Cure are doing that, but you know, then you go, oh God, there's someone I have to sort of not like now. But other than that, I'm a bit of a lifelong fan so far anyway. The Cure is a good example. I've been, you know, listening to them since I was about 11 years old. So yeah, you know.
I want to jump back to something you mentioned earlier. You said that your parents were, you know, very artistic, obviously. So you grew up obviously with a heavy art influence, like from a young age.
Definitely.
How do you think that has affected like your art in particular, like starting at such a young age? And then at what age did you begin to like sculpt your profession and actually like start to hone in on
Mm.
art?
I mean, drawing is just something I've always done.
Sure.
I wasn't, you talk to people and they say, oh, I used to draw and then I sort of stopped and I got back into it, after my divorce or whatever. I've just always been into it.
Yeah.
I've
Lifelong.
been more or less drawing my entire life. So there's always been that kind of consistent um, outlook, that consistent sort of outpouring, I suppose you could
Right.
say. But and other things come in and out like writing or music or this or that, curating things like that. But the parents, I mean, they come out in different ways. I think a lot of people see a very clear line. They can draw a very clear line between my dad's work and mine. He is quite known for his etchings. So there's obviously a real linear discipline that goes into those and a tonal discipline. So it's a very easy line for people to draw between his work and mine.
Okay.
He also has a bit of a sense of humor in his work and a sort of a sense of the sublime, which I think has rubbed off on me somewhat thematically. But the older I get, the more I see my mum's work coming through. She's sort of taken a bit of a different path to my dad, in terms of she's had a few breaks in her career, some of them lengthier than others, but the thing she always goes back to are these sort of larger than life size bronze figures. So they'll be 7 feet tall or whatever.
Oh,
And the
right.
thing I'm noticing now is a sort of an interest in form and mass that I've been trying to capture in my drawings for the last few years, that I can see that is her legacy, if that makes sense, really turning something around and trying to understand how that mass works and where the weight sits and how the form sort of undulates around in a 3D space. So yeah, those sorts of little revelations to the self are always nice to come across, in your later years. I
Yeah.
always felt like I wasn't very conscious of much at all in my 20s, but I was making a lot of work. And the last 10 years, I've been able to look back at that and say, oh, that was about this and that was about that. And I was doing this in response to that. So it's, a little bit of self-discovery there, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. In Dread Sovereign, you do have a lot of like human form and
Yeah.
like anatomy, if you will. A lot of like human and facial features are just amazing. Like, is that what you're referencing when you're saying, "Oh, I look back at the last 10 years and realize, like, oh, that's where my mom was coming from."
Yeah. Yeah, the Dread Sovereign book's kind of fun now because it's just old enough. I think that was 2017. It's just old enough now that I can sort of see it with a little bit of objectivity and distance. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing the beginnings in there of what I'm doing now, but I'm also seeing the end of some things that I started, way back when I was in undergrad, at art school, trying to do this and that. And it's nice sort of when you can see that perspective and you see that one thing's fading out and the other's sort of growing. So there's a few wrestlers in there, and that's something I've been really focusing on the last few years. It sounds a bit crazy, but yeah, it's actually been a really sustaining interest. And so I'll just jump up because I can probably sense where the next question is. I'll just say I think it's maybe for me personally phasing out a lot of the superhero things that I was drawing in my 20s. I think part of that I still read a lot of comics, but I'm just so sick of the superhero that. We're seeing it in every movie, everything, and it's just getting a bit exhausting to me. And I feel like even contemporary superhero comics. There's a few good ones, but it's pretty rough going, I feel like. So in a way, the wrestling's kind of taken me back to that special place where I think it's got a nostalgic element, but it's also taking me into the future a little bit in terms of practice.
I was going to ask.
Too deep. I'm sorry.
No. I was going to ask like how that connects, because obviously it's like the superhero thing. It's like when you're a kid, and that's all relative. And then wrestling was a huge part of every kid's life. I feel like in the 80s, like, you know, when you see illustrations of Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, and a whole entire book based around Mankind, it's like these are the guys that we grew up watching. The first poem in the other book, I don't want to jump around too much, we'll get there, but without even realizing what I was reading, within the first 2 lines I knew exactly what it was referencing, just because I felt like it's a demographic. Like if you know exactly what 6,000 tax means in a cage match, you know.
That was a really fun project that I did. For those watching, I did a project with a Brisbane-based poet by the name of Nathan Shepherdson. He's just a few years older than me, but I feel like I've only met Nathan in the last 12 months or so. He is also, his father was a painter of quite the repute in Australia. Probably, I'm not sure if he has a reputation overseas. I couldn't tell you that, but certainly in Australia, and definitely Queensland, my home state. So we've got a few perspectives that I think are quite similar, and a few ways of seeing things that are quite similar. And I just put it to him. I had this idea for a wrestling book, and I'd been reading his poetry, and I thought, what the hell? Let's see if he's interested. And he sort of took it upon himself as a challenge. He wrote all of those poems within about 4 months. And I think there's 55 poems in there, something like that. And so I felt very fortunate. I could just find images and match them to the piece. And that was a really, really fun project. And we sort of knocked that out in about 4 months, 5 months altogether.
That's
and it just
record time.
Yeah, it was just great. There was he sort of sent the layout of the poems, and so I didn't change that too much. I just sort of slotted the images in. We were very low tech and sort of designed it on like Microsoft Word or something. And it all just came together, and I'm very pleased with it, actually.
It's awesome, man. Yeah, thank you again for sending those along. It's awesome to check them out.
My pleasure.
You know, my introduction to you was Floodland through Argle Bargle, and then Summer Special that you helped do with Jared Cody Wolf. So I was like, oh, I know this guy's gonna be fun. You know, like if he does a whole He-Man zine, like that's, you know, insane. But then when I got it, because I didn't realize that it was such a collaboration. So when I ordered it from strangers and got it, I was like, oh shit, there's like, you know, 10 artists in there. It's insane. Yeah. So how come just you and Jared Cody Wolf are on the you edited it or like put it together? Like how'd that come together to the point where, you know, that's your thing?
We just got chatting on Instagram. I think we did a bit of a swap. He sent me some of his comics. I sent him some of my comics and my zines. I've got all these zines. I don't know really what to do with them. I went through a real phase of zine making about 10 years ago, and then I just sort of recently got into it. So I had this big backlog of, I think I printed about 20 different zines at the same time. So I was like, here. And we just got talking about it. He was like, hey, would you want to collaborate? Because I think he works in a sort of a similar fashion to me. He sort of has this referencing, juxtaposing, let's slap it all together and see what happens kind of aesthetic. And I honestly thought we would be kind of working on the same pages a bit more. But it worked out quite well. I think he went off and did the hero story. I went off and did the villain story. And then we kind of slotted the start and the end, and it was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and then we invited a bunch of other cartoonists who we knew and asked them to contribute, these pinups, which was just great fun. It was, seeing Ed Luce drawing Man-at-Arms and this sort of thing. I mean, that's like dream come true for me.
It's rad. It's super rad. And it's all the guys that are like in it right now that are kind of doing it hard, and trying to make it a name for themselves.
It was interesting seeing who he invited and who I invited, because I felt like I didn't have as many contacts, in the sort of cartooning world as he did, but I felt really good because I got to bring like Josh Bayer in and Ed Luce, so I felt pretty good.
Those are the guys. Those guys are beasts.
Oh, I'm just such a fan. We're actually working on a sequel called Winter Special right now. I don't know if it'll be earthy or winter, but we're trying. It's a Ninja Turtles based one.
I was super excited to see that was Ninja Turtles this time because my brother's 7 years older than me. I'm 34. So we're all right in that same era. So wrestling, He-Man, and Ninja Turtles is like this is my childhood.
It was a good time. It was a real good time. We thought that'd be the next logical progression. This one, unfortunately, I've had some really big life changes in the last few months, like moving cities, new job, moving house, all the craziness. So I haven't had as much time as I hoped to sort of contribute to a comic. So I'm sort of I've done, I think, 7 or 8 pinups for it. But so it'll be, I think this one will be much more sort of anthology based. So a lot of different people are contributing, 2, 3, 4, 5 page comics rather than us trying to sort of do a longer form contained story that's collaborative. It was just the way it worked out. If I could have delayed 6 months, that would have been good. But actually, I've got my pinups just here. If you want to sort of see,
yeah, absolutely, man.
Bit of an exclusive for you guys.
You see it first. This is gonna be the trailer.
So I don't know if you've ever seen them, but you find those pictures of like the Ninja Turtle movie costumes today, and they're all had it because they're foam rubber and they're falling to bits. So I've done a series of those.
Oh yeah.
So I just didn't have time to do a comic, so I think they're pretty fun.
Oh yeah,
this is my favorite.
Yeah.
Wait, put that.
Yeah, so I've just been sort of cranking these out. So I don't know if Jared will use them for like end pages or
sick.
We'll see. They're ostensibly pinups, so we'll see. They're sort of scary, and this is probably the famous one. The rotting Leonardo costume is quite well known. So
that's so funny. Yeah, I've seen those pictures. So funny. It's I mean, you have to expect it. When you go back and watch the movies, it just looks so uncomfortable. Like,
oh yeah,
I feel bad for those guys trying to do ninja kicks and shit.
I read one of those like oral histories of the first movie. What was it on? I can't remember the website, and it was actually fascinating. Like, I didn't realize how close that came to not being made, and they made quite a bit of money from the investment. But just hearing the actors talking about it, they were like, "Oh, those costumes, they were just and sweating buckets."
Oh, I bet
buckets and buckets.
That whole movie, that first one too, is just shot in New York City, probably in the summer.
Yeah,
and then, like on a farm, and the whole like farm just is oversaturated with light. It's so bright. Gotta be.
I actually have a real soft spot for that movie. It's one of those ones I sort of come back to every year or so, and I'm actually working on a book with my co-writer. We've just finished a book for Rutgers University Press, but on comics and graphic novels and literary theory. But we're doing a sequel which is to do with comic related films, and I've been thinking a lot about comic films lately because there's so many awful ones, but there's some that I think really capture that sort of comicness really well, and that's one of them. I think it really captures the spirit of what comics are sort of trying to do in a way, and that sort of, there's a particular narrative sort of feel that I think is missing in a lot of those really huge budget sort of Marvel films. You know, I don't know.
So,
I'm sure we can tease that out a little if you want to. But,
well, I was gonna say,
I love that movie.
What is that like that? In your opinion, that essence that a comic should be striving for, like that may or may not be hit or miss?
I think when you get too serious, too self-serious all the time, that's a bit of a problem, particularly with your Spider-Mans and your Batmans and whatever. I mean, because it's ridiculous, right? But embrace it. You know, that's the problem, I think, with you're getting all these big budget Disney executives in, and they don't want it to be ridiculous because they're spending all this money on it.
Yeah,
and so it's very important.
It's like a realistic take on it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Like, it's fucking Spider-Man. Or whatever, you know, like just have fun for God's sake, you know.
I think that's what there's something to be said about the Into the Spider-Verse movie for that reason, because it combines so many different styles of art, but as a movie itself, the narrative and the story is good. Like it doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult, if you're familiar with the comic or not, like it's a fun comic movie.
I have to own up as to not having seen that one, but I have heard it's excellent from reliable sources, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. I think I reached Spider-Man saturation after the first reboot.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of it.
How many?
I don't watch much of any of the superhero stuff. I do like the darker stuff. Like I did like Joker. That was fun.
I actually really enjoyed that. I thought that was actually a really interesting movie. And yeah, actually, that's a good point. That's a very good counterpoint to what I just said, because it's not a very fun movie at all.
Right.
No, but there's something about it that
I liked it.
Maybe it's the artistic take or the more take on it, I guess. I don't know.
It was kind of a love letter to Scorsese. And I know Scorsese's not down on the whole superhero film thing, but oh God, wouldn't it be fun if he did one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I'd love to see that. I would love to see that.
It would be, that's what needs to happen for like a good, realistic comic book movie, is have Scorsese do it. Because then the dialogue would be legit, like the tension would build, and then there would be some crazy superhero shit happening too, you know?
Yeah, I would enjoy that. I know I would enjoy that.
Dude, all right. So let's we're getting just into crazy.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's good.
I have that tendency.
It's exactly what I would sit here and talk about all day, dude. Like, it's my wheelhouse. But I do want to ask you another thing about is it like how do you, when you tell someone the title of the book from 2021, what do you title it? What do you call it?
Yeah, I had a conversation with Nathan about this. He was insistent that we stick with.
Dude,
but,
I was wondering how this question was going to get answered. I love it.
We did have a conversation about it being called. There's a great quote in there along the lines of it, and it's in German, but it's because I think he lost his ear in a match in Germany, and it's something along the lines of, we would have had the German line and then the translation, which is something along the lines of, can you please not forget the plastic bag with my ear in it? And I thought that was a nice sort of a nice title, but we ended up with Nathan says it much better than I do, so
it's awesome when you read it, because you know exactly what it's supposed to sound like. But I was just curious if you were telling people verbally if it was something different.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I just it's my wrestling poetry book, you know.
No, it rules. It really does, man. So
and there's not many wrestling poetry books out there in the world, I can tell you that.
And it's just a fun
maybe
book of
a world
poetry.
first.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, if you know it's related to wrestling, all the stories you remember them. I mean, he talks about, like, Owen Hart falling off the rafters and stuff. There's a whole poem about that, like that section adapted from the book. But it's beautiful, even if you don't know about wrestling and you just are reading it for what it is.
I've actually been reading his second book. I'm just about finished. I was just reading a little bit today, and he's a lot of fun to read. Old Mick Foley. I there's that saying, you don't want to meet your heroes and all of that. From every single source I've ever found, everyone's universally saying he's a lovely, lovely person to meet and a real gem. And I think it kind of comes through. He's got that enthusiasm about the whole thing, despite his horrific injuries and all the rest of it. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah, and everything I've seen of his interviews or behind the scenes documentaries, like type footage and stuff, it seems so genuine. He seems like genuinely just like a sweet dude.
Yeah.
Like, he just got murdered by the Undertaker or The Rock. I forget who it is. And his daughters are crying. They're all little, like 3 years old. And he's trying to explain to him that daddy's going to be okay while he's bleeding out of his head. I mean, it doesn't seem fake at all. It just seems like that's who the guy is. It's just a big teddy bear.
In the book I'm reading, it's called, what is it called? It's called something along the lines of, it's got a title, but the subtitle is Why the Real World is Faker Than the World of Wrestling, which I like. But
that's a great
he's got this hilarious photo of him with Mickey Mouse at Disney World, and he's in like his tracksuit with a bum bag, fanny pack, and he's like, it's just, I was like, no one else would publish that. It's the daggiest photo, but he just seems, he's the dude. He's dude love, Like he can't. I love him. He's great. It's just great.
When you're working on these books, when you're doing the illustrations, you said you were able to kind of put together past pieces. So how much work do you create for a project when it comes to something like that, where you have to kind of contribute dozens of illustrations?
Yeah. That was an interesting one, because those works, I hadn't really created them specifically for the book. They were really for exhibiting. So usually when I'm exhibiting, I just make. And if a show comes up, I go, oh, what do I have? And sort of make a cutoff point, which is usually around the time I've scanned them or had them photographed. And then I make decisions based on that. Whereas it's a bit tougher for comic work. I'm a lot slower when it comes to comics, because you're dealing with 6-8 images in one, page after page after page. So I've actually got a long-term comic I've been working on with a good friend of mine. We've been working on this thing for about 6 years now, and we're getting close. He's finished penciling just about. So it's a funny thing. I've written it. He then pencils it. Then I ink it and letter it, and he's coloring it at the end. So we're sort of slowly moving through this crazy process. He's penciled everything. I think I've lettered everything. I've inked about 2/3 of it, and he's colored some as well. Oh, I've got an ink spot on me. Yeah, so we're getting there. It's a much slower process.
Is he there local with you, or are you guys having to like transfer this through email and like Dropbox?
He was a local back when we started. I think we started this when I was living in Brisbane, which is now 3 cities ago. He's still there. We went to art school together.
Okay.
He was in my animation class, which I did 2 years of. And then I had a break, and then I changed over to the visual art degree. So yeah, he's still there. I moved to Sydney after that, and then up to Townsville, which is my hometown, and also the hometown of the Powder Puff Girls, which I like to tell people. And then here to Rockhampton 3 months ago. So yeah, it's been a crazy few years.
Yeah, how I know like this is a dumb question like right now, but like through COVID, I know what it was like here in the States. Like, how was it in Australia? And I know you don't really know how to compare it to what we had, but like just how was it over there?
Well, I've got a few friends that are over in the States, and they have been through the whole thing, and they've been keeping me fairly informed. I think it's actually been fairly cruisy here, aside from some pretty big outbreaks in Sydney and Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere else, it's been quite cruisy because what they did, I don't know if they did this in the States, but they just closed off all the borders here between the states. And Queensland, where I've been living, it didn't have very many cases at all. But since just before Christmas, we've reopened the borders, and now it's sort of blooming, let's say. But it's the Delta strain or the whatever strain, the one that's not too horrible compared to some. So just about everyone. I knew a few people that got it early on, but just about everyone that's got it now, it's been the kind of one you want to get rather than
feels
the
like
one so it's happening.
You're staying safe. You've been able to avoid it.
Doing our best. We're wearing masks at work and all of that sort of thing. But we're extra vigilant right now because the gallery I'm working for, where it's a brand new building which has been built over the last couple of years, and we're launching in 2 weeks last night. So,
oh wow,
and we've had some close calls. We've had people from other parts of the organization come in and go home, and then we find out that they've got it. And luckily we haven't. So we're just trying to sort of make it through that last 2 weeks. Hopefully we'll get there unscathed for the big launch. And then we'll probably all get it. We'll see.
As long as you get it open though, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about how you linked up with Stanley and Christopher and getting Argle Bargle going, because it's the three of you guys, right? Is it?
I mean, Stanley.
Like
it's really
Stanley is the one.
Yeah, Stanley's running it. He and his partner, his beautiful partner, they're just amazing people. But we all met at the same time. We actually met at this residency in Finland, at a place called the Atelis Residency in Finland. I highly recommend it. They do several different, or they might be closed right now. I don't know, but they do several different residencies every year, and each one is differently themed. And we all linked up there, I think in 2018, for the comic book and graphic illustration sort of themed residency the three of us were there and maybe about 15 other people, something like that. And it was a month-long thing, and we just sort of I loved it. It was just wonderful. We were all there working on projects for an entire month in this idyllic Finnish countryside, and it was great, going on bike rides and saunas and drinking whiskey. It was just wonderful. So
very Finnish. You're like in the sauna.
Loved it.
Was
Stanley was he was really big into the sauna, actually. He was there every day.
So that was like a
artist summer camp.
Artists, or what was that like? How would you define that? Like, you guys went on a vacation to do art for a month?
Yeah, basically. I mean, this
so
place,
awesome.
this residency. I mean, I think they do 10 or 12 different residencies a year, and so they've got it decked out that they can have about. It might not be quite 20 people, but it'd be close to it. And sort of, I think it was a school at one time, or something like that. And now it's now the guy that owns it, he's sort of using it for this purpose. And so I don't know if it's set up as a not-for-profit or a business, but it was just great. We just, there were people there from South Africa, there were people there from Persia, there were people there from the States, Canada. It was just great. We just had a great time. Stanley and I really clicked, and Chris, we really clicked as well. And so did they. I think we were all, the three of us, actually, now that I think of it, we were kind of a bit older than the other guys. Chris and Stanley and I, we were sort of at different ages ourselves, but everyone else was sort of in their 20s, and we were sort of in our 30s, 40s or beyond. And, you get that sort of, let's see what, let's see what they're doing. Let's see what they're up to. But we had a great time. It was a really great group of people.
Oh, it's awesome, man. Yeah, just because we've talked to Chris on here.
Great. I'll have to watch that.
And, we actually did 2 episodes with him, because the first one we did, my computer on my laptop got stolen like that week that we recorded it. So it never, we never got to edit it or do anything with it.
Right.
But then, so he was nice enough to do another one with us. And then that kind of sparked the conversation of,
great.
Working together, and then now doing the distribution for Stanley with Argle Bargle, which is insane. It's awesome.
He's been doing some wonderful stuff. Just wonderful.
Really has. Yeah.
It's cool.
I can't wait to get his new book. I still don't have it, but I can't wait.
Yeah, no, his stuff looks amazing. I was introduced to your work through it. Obviously, Chris is like prolific as shit, just creating constantly, just insane. With the just always working while he's working and being a teacher or professor. It's insane. So I was really lucky to like link up with you guys and be able to work with you to try to get those books in some hands out here.
It's very appreciated. Any help we can get, it's very welcome. Did I tell you I got to bring Stanley over to Australia for an exhibition? Did I get to tell you that? I can't remember.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that was good. And that sort of led on to what we did with Floodland in a way. He'd sort of come over just after we'd had this massive flood in my hometown. It was like a once in 100-year kind of flood. And got to bring him over to do an exhibition and a book. And it was a really stunning show. He basically brought everything he'd been working on the last couple of years and put it all up and did a wall drawing, and it's just marvelous. He's just an absolute killer draftsman. And actually his comics, I really enjoy reading them. There's just this, I feel like calling them surreal is sort of almost selling them short, because they're quite, in terms of the pacing and the way these images uncoil and flow, it's really something far superior, I think, than often a lot of surrealists can get across. You know, the amount of emotion and sort of depth he gets across is quite amazing.
Yeah, I've only seen a few of the images online. I don't have any of his books in hand yet, but I mean, very just like striking work and like really kind of resonates, powerful images that I've seen, at least the ones that, you know, I guess they've been advertised or the ones that they've been posted.
Stunning work. Stunning work.
I don't want to say similar style, but like similar medium in the sense that, you know, a lot of line work, a lot of like scratchy lines, cross hatching, you know, similar in that sense. But definitely has a feel of its own.
I would love to. I think if we did that residency again, I would love to actually do a series of collaborative works with Stanley. I think that would be a really, really interesting project.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
I feel like it's meant to happen. Like that should have already have happened, you know?
Yeah, right? I mean, maybe we need to think about going back to Finland. I think that'll be then watching this.
any excuse, you know.
Yeah, but it was a really organic process working with him on Floodland as well. Basically, once we made the decision that it would be black and white, we sort of started working backwards about this sort of story, and I sort of was throwing a lot of different pages at him, and he'd go, "Oh, yeah, that one will," and sort of he sort of almost was acting as a sort of an editor or a curator, and it was a really fun process. Sort of going back and forth with him about that, and then we had to sort of get word out and do a crowdfunder and all of that. It was my first crowdfunder, so that was pretty fun. My brother did a sort of a video because he was like, "Oh, you have to do a video," and I didn't really want to do one of those hokey crowdfunding things where you're talking to the camera and sort of explaining why your work's so great. So my brother cut together a sort of a video with my images, and sort of there's a couple of open license 9 Inch Nails albums out there where you can, if you credit Trent Reznor, you can use it for free, and as long as you're not making money off it. And so he cut it with that, and it just, you know, just immediately raised the bar 1,000%. So made it semi-professional in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's rad.
Yeah, me and Jim did like cheesy promotion things, like on purpose, like purposely trying to be as cheeseball as we could be, but I think it just came across like we were cheeseballs. Like I don't know,
like we were actually trying, and we didn't get cheeseball enough, I guess.
The intention like wasn't there or something. I don't know. It was weird, but it's funny that you say that line, because that's the worst. It's like, hey, I'm an artist. Buy my art. You know, it seems anything you say like that is just so insincere.
I'm quite comfortable now in my position. I've been working in galleries for, I don't know, 7 years or something, and so now I'm quite comfortable to sort of being in a position where I don't have to sell my work to get by, and so I don't really. I've gotten really bad at participating with that whole sort of selling thing, and you know, you've got the steady income, so I very much settled into making the work I want to make rather than trying to please anyone else. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think that's a dream as an artist, right?
You know, you're forever dreaming up ways of stopping work and being able to do it full time, but not quite a reality just yet.
I was curious. You mentioned it that you've been doing gallery shows for near a decade now. It's like you're established as a gallery artist. Is there anything, like any insight or like any tips you would give yourself now, like then, as far as, you know, I mean, if someone asked, how do I get a gallery show? It's like, do the work, get there yourself, you'll figure it out. But you as yourself as an artist, like looking back, you're like, is there stuff I would have done differently? Like, what could I have done better?
Yeah. I mean, I've always sort of probably the biggest decision I made in terms of exhibiting. I made it probably 10 years ago, and I decided I wasn't going to pay for exhibitions anymore, because there's a bit of I don't know if it's the same over your way, but over here, particularly in the capital cities, as a student and as an emerging artist, you're sort of expected to pay for the privilege of exhibiting your work. And I got to a point where I'd had a few exhibitions where they weren't paid, and it was a really great experience. And I just went, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore, because you shouldn't really have to. And it was the principle of it. And as soon as I made that call, it was weird that this whole other range of possibilities opened up. And I don't think I ever did that again. I mean, I've chipped in with other people to do, say, a book, or, if we wanted to have a launch drinks or something like that. But it really was that simple. So I would like to tell myself that 5 years earlier, perhaps don't waste your money on these ridiculous gallery hire fees or whatever.
Kind of like pay to play shows when you're trying to like be in a band, and so
you get 50 tickets, but
50 tickets.
Yeah. It just seems it's like that. What is it? Pay to play, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like the big kind of like standard out here is like a 50-50 split, which is still insane, because if you're making stuff that you're trying to sell for $40,
you're
getting $20. It's it's hard, that.
I guess the plus now is that there are some alternative ways of getting your work out there that didn't exist 10 years ago. Like I've had a website I've had a website for 12 years. But I've probably sold, I think, 1,000% more on just through Instagram. And that, that there are tools out there, and I know people that are completely independent, selling their comics online, and they've built a real audience, and they're just doing incredibly well. And hats off to them. It's fantastic. But I'm not quite at that level yet with my digital promotional prowess, but maybe one day.
Man. It is really hard.
I'd rather be in the studio.
It's funny, man. I feel like there's just like a knack to it too, especially with the younger generation, of just knowing, I guess, how and who to market to, where maybe we're just old Ninja Turtles fans and we're out of the
That's definitely my demographic. Masters of the Universe, Hulk Hogan, Ninja Turtles demographic. Definitely.
That's so
all right.
funny.
I got a curveball for you, bro.
Sure, please.
I'm gonna dig into your brain a bit.
Right.
I don't remember which book it was in, but I was flipping through and I saw an image, and it stood out to me just from like the brightness of the color and the detail in it. It was looking like a point of view, look down at a table, and there was drinks everywhere, and there was some sketches, and it was like tearing up of the coaster underneath the beer. Right? Shredding this thing. Like as I looked at this image, I smiled because I was like, there is for sure a story behind this. Like right here, this image in itself, like it can tell a whole story. I gotta know, like, what is that story?
That was the back cover image of a comic I did called Pub Comics.
Okay.
Number one. I don't know why I wrote number one on it, because I never did a number two. I did that when I was moving towns. So I was moving house, everything packed up, and I didn't really have, I think I had a journal. So I actually drew that whole comic in a journal, because I didn't have a studio. I didn't even have a sort of kitchen table to draw on. So it was all very, regimented little journal to draw in.
Yeah.
And I was very much inspired by, I had just discovered Josh Bayer at that point and was really getting into his sort of the way he'll just get in there and do it. And then he'll kind of come back in and cut into it with, collage or whiteout, or he'll draw over something, or he'll redo a panel, and he just keeps sort of smashing it until he feels it's right. And I was sort of trying to do that and draw a sort of comic, top left panel right through to the bottom without planning it, no pencil, just straight on through. And so that comic was the result. But the back page was definitely a sort of a rehash of my university years, my art school years. I feel like I went to Queensland College of Art at just the perfect time for me. It was a sort of a new campus, and we had a pub that was sort of actually joined onto the campus, which was great.
Right.
And we would head down there for drinks after classes, and the lecturers would often join us and sort of hold court. And I always sort of said that, you'd learn more down there than up in the classroom, because that's where you'd get all the sort of ins and outs of. You'd learn how to draw or whatever up in the classroom, but down at the pub, you'd learn about the actual art world.
Yeah.
And who's ripping off who, and who you should trust and who you shouldn't trust, and it would get very messy and very boozy. And because we'd all be quite poor students, you'd buy a jug of beer, and that was your contribution for the afternoon / evening, or a bowl of chips or something, and we'd all sort of live off of that for hours and hours and hours. So it was really very much harking back to that. I really there's something special about the little beer coaster designs, I find.
Agreed.
And I'd just left Sydney, and so I felt the need to pay homage to my favorite Sydney beer, which is a beer called Resch's. And you don't actually find Resch's outside of Sydney very often. You might find it in a small town outside of Sydney, but that's about it. And very happy to discover a pub here in Rockhampton that has Resch's on tap. So I was like, ooh, I like this place. But the other beers on there were very much the kind of beers we had on tap in those sort of student days. So there's the VB. I remember there's a VB logo there, which is short for Victoria Bitter, which is sort of over here. That's sort of the tradies beer, the sort of working class beer, and it's pretty horrible. But anyway, and then there's 4X, which is the Queensland equivalent, which is equally horrible. But 4X has the benefit of having one of the great logos of all time. And if you Google it, I urge anyone not from Australia, I urge you to Google the 4X man, because they had this great logo of this guy with the tilted 4X hat holding up a beer. And I found out he was actually a real person that this logo was based on, and he was a dwarf that the company sort of had as a sort of a mascot / promo guy in the early years, which I found fascinating. And he's winking while he's holding up his beer. So yeah, bit of esoteria for anyone not from Queensland. Yeah, the 4X man. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. I don't know how. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Barnum and Bailey's circus of old here in America, like in the late 1800s, and or you know what I mean, is the traveling circus out here. It was the first wave of entertainment. And I was reading this book, and it had all the like sideshow people, basically all the like quote unquote freak show types, the bearded lady and the dwarf. And I didn't know that the name Tom Thumb, which you always relate to, is like a small person here at the States. Like, oh, Tom Thumb is like a little, it's almost like a leprechaun. I always thought of when I thought of Tom Thumb, but it's based off this real person. It's like the legendary. He's 2'9". He's a grown man, and like they have all these old pictures of these people and the first like Siamese twins and why they're called Siamese and. Because they came from this area, or they not even came from this area, but they marketed them from this area of Saigon or something. Like it is super fascinating, super crazy, but it's just almost like you couldn't do that today. You couldn't parade around an insane group of people with disabilities and be like, come one, come all, come check this shit out.
Oh, completely different world. And I always felt that there's not that, and I promise you, I'm not trying to steer the conversation back to wrestling, but I've always felt that there's a bit of an aspect of that in wrestling, particularly the traveling sideshow kind of idea and going from town to town. I feel like there's a real vibe with the sort of southern states of the USA and South America as well, with that kind of traveling roadshow vibe, It's a very interesting sort of lifestyle, and it persists to some extent. I mean, it's not the same, obviously, and mainstream wrestling's very sort of woke now, but it does sort of persist in some sort of a way.
Absolutely. And it's almost to maybe not the top levels of wrestling aren't as much like that anymore where they were 30 or 40 years ago, but definitely the lower rings, the guys trying to make it to the big leagues, they're still doing that. They're doing Tulsa, Oklahoma and Knoxville, Tennessee, they're doing 2 shows a night or whatever. And I kind of attribute it to like comics, like stand-up comedians trying to make it, and they're going to all these their places, and they're staying in Motel 6s and just trying to hone their craft in night after night, and it's tolling, I'm sure, man. Insane. We're lucky. We could just
I have a theory about all of that. Yeah, the sort of that feeding off of the crowd and responding to them and sort of trying to wrangle them and get them along on that journey with you. That's actually, I'm sure that would be a similar thing for stand-up comedians. That's an area I don't know as much about, but I'm sure there's some sort of weird energy kind of manipulation that you have to get into as a stand-up comedian, because that's all about the peaks and troughs of where you're trying to take people along with you. It doesn't always work, especially with me. I'm not very good with a lot of stand-up comedy, but
I don't think you really are.
I do this. It's interesting, just that kind of lifestyle, though. Like you were saying, it's something that is almost a thing of the past, like a traveling salesman or something, like where you're not quite sure where you're gonna be the next couple days.
Yeah,
got to be like exhilarating, but also just like on the edge of your seat. Like, what am I doing all the time? Like,
that monotony when you're just traveling, one night here, one night here, one night here. I'm sure that's, you hear these crazy stories about people playing practical jokes on each other, and some of them are really quite extreme practical jokes, or just going on benders just to break up the boredom. Self-medicating, because you can't sleep from your aches and pains. It's all very human stuff, and it's sort of the flip side to that celebrity larger than life.
Yes, larger than life. That's kind of what I was just about to say. Like harking back to the freak show we were talking about at the circus. Nowadays they really are, though. These guys are larger than life. They're bigger than reality, like the way that they look. The women are like the most gorgeous, and they have the character and the attitude to match that just forms this perfect character, and it's like they're sculpted to be this entertaining, like theatrical event for you,
it's
Same
just
way.
as much theater as it is like athleticism, which is crazy.
But they still, in my opinion, are accentuating these out of the norm features. These guys are 6'7", or all of these massive guys, because not everyone's built like that.
Yeah.
So let's get you in the ring and have you throw someone around. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think part of that, it's funny, in the last few years getting into wrestling as a source for my artwork, a lot of that is actually what's sort of drawn me right back into it in a big way, is that sort of, there are some weird parallels with, people I think that create for a living, because you are putting yourself out there for people to see and judge. And I mean, wrestling has a very physical toll, but I think there's a weird sort of, I don't know, there's so many artistic people out there that there's this other weird pressure that comes from being criticized or being judged, or you look at how many drug overdoses there are in music or film or whatever. There's some sort of a pressure going on. I think I found myself relating in a sort of quite a real way. It sounds silly, but in quite a real way, with the physical realities of the pain. I can't really talk about it without bringing it up, so I'll just bring it up. I had leukemia when I was 19, and one of the medications broke down my hip joint quite badly. So I've been living with quite a bit of pain since I was 20 years old. And I'm actually just about to have it replaced, which is wonderful. I'm very excited about that.
Wow.
But there is, there's a sort of a level to that I can kind of relate to, in terms of what, you don't want to self-medicate so much that you're going to give yourself problems down the line. And I think in wrestling, when you're mixing, say, painkillers with steroids or with recreational drugs, you can have some real problems. And we've seen that. I think there's been a hell of a lot of these guys just dropping like flies lately, possibly because of the combination of their lifestyle mixed with some of the self-medicating that was going on, and some of the, let's call it, psychological medication going on. It's a tough life, and I, having a fair bit of experience with pain, I can honestly kind of say it can be really hard. And when it's bad, I mean, there can be nothing more debilitating than some serious intense pain. So yeah, I found that I have to say, I'm, in terms of symbols or ciphers from my own experience, they're actually very relatable and appropriate for me in some sort of a way. I find them very flawed and very human, and that's perhaps why I think they've been replacing, say, superheroes or whatever else over the last few years, and have really been taking a lot more time in my thinking. I'm sort of figuring out, I'm trying to, I think it could be worth a book down the line, maybe the one after next. Like, there's actually not a great deal of theory about wrestling out there. There's a lot of really great biographies and autobiographies and historical accounts, but not a great deal of theory. And I think wrestling it's got a lot of really interesting overlaps with theater, with gender theory, with pop cultural theory, but particularly theater. I mean, you could make an argument for it being an art form.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's not a sport, and we know that. They call it sports entertainment now for tax reasons, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
But if you look at the nuts and bolts of it, it's more theatre than sport. So
Yeah.
why don't we discuss why don't we discuss it as an art form? It could be an interesting conversation.
It is.
I'm sure being able to draw those parallels too, like played so deep in like being able to create that book and like draw all of that, thinking about it from a different perspective than just what you saw on TV.
Right.
Yeah, certainly.
You do capture like the vulnerability and kind of like the depth of emotion that goes into getting your ass beat.
Yeah, I think I have a sort of a sympathy or an empathy for those guys. And I'm not as big as Hulk Hogan, obviously, but I'm just a bit under 6'6", and I always have a bit of a, I got teased as a kid for being too big or whatever.
Being the giant.
So I have a soft spot for the freaks. I do. I like that I'm the same height as like Razor Ramon. I love that. There's not many people I can sort of have that sort of funny connection to. And then he showed up in that doco about Jake the Snake trying to get over his horrendous injuries and pain, and
how crazy,
that was a good one.
How crazy is that movie? Yeah, that's so wild. If anyone hasn't watched it, look up what's it called? The Jake the Snake documentary, where he's literally he's back on that amateur tour, basically, playing Poughkeepsie or wherever in Iowa. Just
and got a lot of time for those guys and
smoking crack in the day's end. It's crazy. It's so wild.
A wild boy.
Yeah,
and then I saw his Dark Side of the Ring episode, and that just blew my mind. I had no idea about any of that stuff. With his dad, and that was heavy. That was a heavy episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's so much backstory kind of generated to become these characters, but then there's actual backstory to the humans that are these characters. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
the fiction.
You always only get part of it on these.
Yeah, the fiction's not as interesting as the reality. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, totally, man. I want to ask you before we get wrapped up here. What do you have anything coming up soon that you are putting out?
Yeah.
What's the next project you got going on?
Well, I've got a book that I've co-written coming out from Rutgers University Press this year sometime. I can't give you more information than that. Called Lit Comics, which is about comics, graphic novels, and literary theory. So I've written that with Adam Gexey. He's a lecturer from the University of Sydney, and that I can't wait for that to come out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping that people who don't usually read books about comics theory might quite enjoy it, because we've got the theoretical element, but then we've got some very real case studies, and really looking closely at the work of a few cartoonists in particular, including Josh Bayer, who we've already spoken about, and the Hernandez brothers, Simon Hanselman, Tommy Parrish, some really great people like that. So very excited about that. Can't wait for that to come out. We've spent about the last year working on that. And then I've got a few things on the boil, but I don't know when they're coming out, so I won't bring them up. But I'm very excited to be having an exhibition at Umbrella Studio in Townsville again in April, which is called My Mother Blessed and Cursed with Sons, which is sort of a wrestling reference, but it's also a Camus reference as well. That's a line lifted directly from a Camus novel, but I think it sort of quite nicely summarizes my mother's experience dealing with two sons, obsessed with wrestling, He-Man, video games, you know, Ninja Turtles, breaking windows, smashing things all the time, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of, it's for mum. It's dedicated to my mum.
That's a good line for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And it's
put
awesome.
up with a lot.
Your parents have to be like so stoked, like being artists themselves and like seeing you exhibiting and creating and you know, just putting in the work, because they know exactly how hard that is to do.
Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. Yeah, they do get, they certainly do understand that part of it. And I feel very lucky and privileged to have their perspectives in my life, and they've always been very supportive. So even though they encouraged me to be a lawyer when I was a kid, don't do art, don't do art, be a lawyer or something. But they were only half serious when they said that. So yeah.
Well, hey man, where can people check out what's your website again, and what's your Instagram? Say it again, and any other work that people.
Yeah, website's real easy. It's just www.jonathanmcburnie.com. If you Google my name, it'll pop up. You'll get the same if you Google my name on Instagram, but the handle is at king_of_nails. That's King of Nails. And I've got the King of Nails on Twitter and a few other things. I've got a link to a big cartel there where you can buy a couple of books and so forth. It's of course available through you guys, and I'm sure you'll share some links, which would be great, and through the Argle Bargle website. I've got stuff in a few shops and galleries around the place, but let's direct them to you, because you've done this wonderful podcast, and please help these guys, buy from these guys, support these guys. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have a chat.
Oh man,
thanks, man.
The pleasure was all on this side of the screen, man.
Anytime.
Thank you for making the time. Sorry again about the miscommunication. The time zone.
Good. We live so far away down here. We are miles away. It's ridiculous.
Well, we won't put it all on you for living on the other side of the world.
Sorry about that. I can't do it.
Yeah. No, it really has been a pleasure, man. It was super nice meeting you. Thanks for the great conversation, and thanks.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
We'll keep everyone updated on what you have going on. Just keep us updated, and we're happy to relay the message for you and try to get as many people introduced to your work as possible, man. Because, like I said, I'm new to your work, and I was blown away just by. I felt stupid for not have seeing it earlier, to be honest.
Thanks a lot. Well, hopefully we get to do some more things in the future.
Yeah, man. We'll definitely do some projects. We got some stuff in the works that I would love if you could be a part of. I'll get you more details on that very soon if you're interested.
Always up for collaborations, definitely.
Sick. All right, man. Well, take care. Really appreciate it again.
Thanks a lot.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to bed.
Yes, you should. It's late.
Later, brother. Thank you. This has been another episode of the Rat Nest Podcast. You can catch us every Friday on YouTube for the video and anywhere you listen to your podcast for the audio. Check us out at Rat Nest Sticker Co. on Instagram and ratneststickerco.com for zines, comics, prints, t-shirts, books, and more. Bye.
Bye.